Welcome back. Professor Laurence Tribe is on the line with us, the professor of constitutional law at Harvard Law School. His most recent book, To End a Presidency, The Power of Impeachment. His Twitter handle is Tribe Law. Professor Tribe, what if, I mean, right now, the Justice Department, Bill Barr's branch, that he's the head of the executive branch, is in defiance of specific court orders. If that continues, and the president's just in defiance, and even if that goes to the Senate, and the Senate says, okay, all right, or like, Barry Goldwater going over to the White House and telling Richard Nixon, we are going to convict you, you should resign. And Trump says no. I mean, it sounds like you said science fiction, except that this is essentially what has happened. This is what happened in Germany, Italy, and Spain in the 30s. This is what has happened more recently in a number of other countries, around the world that have flipped more or less authoritarian. Do you think that there's any possibility that it could get that bizarre with Donald Trump in the White House and Bill Barr in the Justice Department? And if so, what are the remedies?
Well, there's nothing
or is this the end of the Republic?
Beyond imagination with this bizarre president. He's really unprecedented. And I do think it's conceivable that he would simply say, the Army would have to drag me out of here. And then maybe the Army would. I mean, he is the commander-in-chief, but at that point we would be in a crisis of a sort we really haven't had. Even during the Civil War, Lincoln remained at the head of the Union, and there was a civil war. Some people have threatened that if this guy is removed, there will be another civil war. Some of the ones making that threat are crazy. Others, however, are maybe crazy like foxes, and they're well armed. I really don't, I don't have any answer for what would happen then, but I'm desperately hopeful that we can avoid it. We can avoid it because there may be limits, although we have yet to see them, beyond which even this bizarre president will not go.
Yeah. Or another possible scenario would be Trump gets impeached in the House, he gets convicted in the Senate, he, quote, leaves office. Mike Pence immediately pardons him and makes him a senior advisor to the president. And Trump continues to stay in the White House and tweet and basically run the place. Is that even conceivable?
A possibility. That's, in fact, one of the most plausible scenarios. Suppose that Trump is badly defeated in November of 2020. I don't, by any means, assume that'll happen, but suppose he is. Certainly, at the very least, because he has committed so many crimes that could be prosecuted federally as well as in the state courts, he would resign just before the new president took office, and he would arrange to have been given a pardon by the new president for a day, Michael Pence. But he could still then be prosecuted by state courts, and he's committed, I think, a lot of things that are violations of New York criminal law. And there's no way that the power of the pardon, the president's power of the pardon, can wave a magic wand and keep this guy from being prosecuted by the state of New York and by other states.
Any thoughts on how we can minimize or mitigate the damage that has already been done, frankly, and going forward that any of these scenarios might bring about?
Well, I think the most important single thing, and if any of your readers have ways of reaching their congressional representatives who can then speak to Nancy Pelosi, the most important single thing is to begin a process of dramatic public education that can occur only if we really start a genuine impeachment inquiry. If the nation rises up in full awareness of the corrupt criminality that is really not doing anything for the American people, but is selling us out to foreign adversaries. If the nation wakes up, then with a single voice, the government of the United States can drum Trump out of office. His ability to resist a nation without traditions is going to be limited if there is a massive public outcry.
Yeah, and during the Nixon impeachment inquiry, when it started, I'm doing this from memory, but my recollection was that the support for impeachment at the beginning of it, and at that point, some of the crimes were known, was around 17 or 19%, and 6 months later, after all these hearings had been held, public support was 67%, as I recall, and you know, at that point, then it's either he goes along or he provokes a civil war, it seems.
But you know, things are so different from what they were in the Nixon era. There was no Fox News. There was no, you know, there were no social media platforms. People really did get their news from common sources, and there was less distrust of factual information. We live in a different time when a lot of people just will not open their eyes and see what is staring at them. Remember when the president said, "Don't believe what you see or what you hear. It's not really happening. What's happening is what I say is happening." Right. I mean, that's the end of truth, and the end of truth spells the end of democracy. So we may not be as lucky as they were in the Nixon period. The president and his defense lawyers can be given a full opportunity to respond. Nixon was given that opportunity. He passed it up, but he did send a lawyer to represent him in the House, James St. Clair. We should do that with this president so that he can't claim that he was railroaded, that it was just another witch hunt. He'll have a full chance to present his defense, and then the House of Representatives should reach its conclusions. Has he committed high crimes and misdemeanors? I think the answer is almost certainly going to be yes, but they shouldn't answer the question before they have the hearing. And are those high crimes and misdemeanors so dangerous to the country that he should be out of there as soon as possible? And again, I think the answer is yes. But at the last minute, the House can decide which way to go. Does it hand the impeachment articles as such to the Senate? Or if the Senate's mind is so closed that it hasn't been moved by the hearings and the public attention to the televised day-by-day, drip-by-drip exposures of corruption and criminality, might the House simply decide to wrap it up and itself call these not articles of impeachment, but, for example, conclusions of high crimes and misdemeanors, or findings of conduct unbecoming the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, something that will get the public's attention.
So this would be like a resolution,
stamp
basically.
The president's forehead with a scarlet eye for impeachable. And then he'll have a much harder time getting reelected.
So that would be basically like a resolution of
yes,
sorts.
Yes, it would be formally a resolution of the House, a sense of the House resolution. But a lot of people sort of poo-poo resolutions as though they're not going to make a difference. A resolution that comes at the end of a nationally televised, public, almost trial, and that is appropriately labeled, and names make a difference. That kind of resolution would be a huge albatross around this president's already rather thick neck as he goes into re-election.
Yeah. I'm curious how we define an impeachment inquiry. Is there some magic set of words that I know, for example, the Constitution says that the president's power of pardon is limited during an impeachment.
No, not quite.
Does Congress have to say?
It says that he can't pardon himself to get out of an impeachment.
Oh, so it doesn't mean that he can't pardon, for example, Paul Manafort.
While he's being impeached, he can pardon anybody in the world. But the abuse of the pardon power could be yet another impeachable offense. That is, the fact that a president is undergoing impeachment doesn't mean that he loses the veto power, the pardon power, any of his powers. But what happens is that the House gains power. It gets the ability to overcome grand jury secrecy of the kind that we've heard so much about. It gains the ability to compel testimony. No court would refuse to grant an order to hear from the president's White House counsel once the thing is called an impeachment inquiry. And you ask, are there magic words? Yes, impeachment inquiry. Those are the two magic words.
So the Judiciary Committee would convene a itself, not a subcommittee of the committee. It would simply convene hearings, and they would formally call it an impeachment
but
inquiry.
Jerry Nadler doesn't have the power to give it that name all by himself. It takes the Speaker of the House, it takes a resolution of the House to empower the Judiciary Committee or any other committee to conduct an impeachment inquiry looking to the possible impeachment and removal of a high officer of the United States. Here, it would be the president. So it would take a formal step, a step that as soon as Nancy Pelosi gives the green light, that step would be taken. And what I'm trying to do with the proposal that I've made in my op-ed is to remind the Speaker of constitutional options that she may not have recognized were on the table. Various people are talking to her about it today.
So, looking at the willingness to engage in, at the very least, unorthodox and arguably criminal behavior by this administration, let's say that the Senate or the House convenes, or the House Judiciary Committee convenes a quote impeachment inquiry, and they subpoena Bill Barr, and they ask the Justice Department to turn over to them the grand jury testimony, and Bill Barr simply says no. And then they, hold a contempt hearing, and they hold him in contempt, and then they go to a court.
Tom, the sequence would be different. They would probably go to a court and ask a court to order Barr to take certain steps, like reveal certain things or unredact certain things. That a court would almost certainly order. And if he defies the order...
But what if he ignores the court order?
Well, the Justice Department even now is ignoring temporarily a court order by Judge Sullivan, which he issued last Friday, I think it was, ordering the release of the transcripts of rather dubious conversations that were held between Michael Flynn and Ambassador Kislyak. They're not going to get away with that for long. A court would hold someone like that in contempt, put them in jail if it had to. We're going to come to a point where there is just so many times the administration can try to just say no.